Welcome to a brand new year of an Unearthly Podcast. This is episode 531, streaming live on January 11th, 2025, and featuring The Abominable Snowmen, written by Marvin Haseman and Henry Lincoln, starring Patrick Troughton as the Doctor, Fraser Hines as Jamie McCrimmon, and Deborah Watling as Victoria Waterfield, and animated by Big Finish Creative. I'm Bill Sylvia, the one in black, and with me are co-host Alex Fireheart.
Hello.
And technical director Aaron Romeo Moon Burke.
Hello.
So, how's everybody's New Year's going?
Trying not to melt as per usual lately with how summer in the southern hemisphere has been. Yeah, like
I forget if we've ever asked. Do you like what type of weather do you most prefer? Because I know some people really like summer weather, even though obviously there's still such a thing as too hot. Some people like me definitely prefer the average winter day over the average summer day, regardless.
I by default I prefer winter. I mean, obviously, where I live in Australia, at least, it doesn't get as cold as it could get
fair
in most places in the US. But
like, if I talk about snow here, would you get jealous?
I mean, both I would, but also half the time I can't handle how cold it gets here, so I don't even know how the hell I'd handle snow.
Gotcha.
Even though being
extreme weather in general.
Yeah, like even though being a ginger, you'd think I'd be like built for cold weather, and my body just is confused by the Australian climate. But yeah, like I definitely much prefer winter, but also it's just that like the easiest place to compare it to, and I do this a lot, is I compare my home state of Queensland to Florida. Florida deals with hurricanes a lot. We deal with cyclone. Where I specifically live in my home state anyway deals with cyclones. And it's also just the heat isn't the worst part. It's the humidity. It is very muggy and just gross. Like, that's where the bulk of the worst part of it gets. Like, I've gone down to Melbourne, which is like the entire other end of the country down the coast, and I've gone out there on I don't know what it would be in Fahrenheit, but like a 28-degree day down there, but the humidity is so low that it's nothing.
Right. I like the difference between like a Florida 80 versus a California 80. Well,
yeah, like dry heat versus very wet.
Literally,
heat, I guess.
28 Celsius is 82 Fahrenheit, which I probably should learn to do that in my head, but it's always so convenient to use Google.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think some of the stuff on Windows even lets you switch between the display of like showing what your current thingo is in Fahrenheit and Celsius. But yeah, it's like it's been getting up over 30 degrees Celsius here lately, and it's not great. And then, like, it'd be even worse further north. There are some places that have probably hit closer to 40 Celsius, which I'm pretty sure is around 100 in Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So yeah, not great. It's been like it's been off and on raining, but it hasn't done that much.
It looks like anything between 0 and 20 Celsius is my preferred temperatures.
Yeah, and like, of course, there was also one day where I was glad to make it through the 4 hours at work because I had like 3 nosebleeds in one morning, seemingly. Because like I went to bed super late, had a nosebleed before I went to bed, then had a nosebleed before I went to work, and seemingly might have had a slight nosebleed in my sleep. So I was not full energy going to work, and that
that's
on top of the heat was like
ah.
a lot.
Oh, you get it in the heat. I get that in the winter because it gets so dry, which is why I bought a humidifier before realizing my apartment was too small to use it.
I think I can have them in winter, but I predominantly get them in summer.
Gotcha.
I don't get as many now as I used to, though, thank God. So
The dry heat.
Mm.
My grandparents told my brother as he was getting a nosebleed in Arizona when we were visiting him. Like this 6-year-old kid just no, I think he was actually 4 at the time. He was
That's
just
true. And
freaking out.
yeah, I imagine even warm weather there is as dry as cold weather is in most of the country, so that makes sense. Because like that's my big issue during the winter is that it seems, especially as I get older, I get so dry. Yesterday I had to put lotion on my hands like 5 times just to keep it from feeling like wrinkled up newspaper. So Aaron, anything interesting with you this year so far?
Things are not so bad financially, thank goodness, because I worked a bunch of overtime at the end of fourth quarter, plus we had our attendance incentive was activated for like the 1 quarter out of the year that the company negotiated with our union for, because they couldn't get people to come in. They were so hard up for everyone, so... But yeah, because of that extra money, finances for me aren't quite as tight as they were before. So that's going good. I actually finished a game on one of my streams. I'm really bad at finishing single player campaigns and games and stuff because there's no one there to hold me accountable. So if I'm tired and I don't feel like streaming, I just don't stream. So it took me 200 hours of streaming for Tales of Berseria. It took me about 3 years to get through. And we'll talk about it later, but the latest game I completed took about 2 years, but that was interrupted by a lot of different tragedies and a bunch of other stuff going on. So, but yeah, so that was nice to be able to finish something. On top of that, apparently I've been enjoying Doctor Who so much that I've been falling asleep on the couch to the 24/7 Doctor Who channel on Pluto TV. Yeah, because Pluto TV has it. I believe the Roku channel has 24/7 Doctor Who, and I think Freevee, which is Amazon's free video streaming service with ads. That one also has a 24/7 channel.
I don't think I would risk going to sleep to that because I would be dead asleep and Victoria or Mel would scream and I would bolt upright and like knock over a table or something again.
That actually happened when I was sleeping and Time in the Rani came on.
Yeah, I could see that.
So I'm like, I didn't sleep very well last night.
I used and I still sometimes do this. Like I'll go and find stream VODs, mostly for Undertale now, but I've done it with other RPGs as well. I'd find like 6-hour stream VODs and throw it on to help me, for background noise when I'm sleeping. Yeah. And I noticed Jaden Animations has just enough of a high-pitched voice that like I'll get to almost to sleep and she'll say something and it'll jolt me awake. So I'm like, I can't listen to her to sleep anymore because her voice is just high-pitched enough for that.
Yeah, I used to fall asleep to Driving in the Rain, which is basically 10-hour videos spliced together of some random person driving through Japan in the rain along the highways and stuff, so...
At that point, a white noise generator with a rain effect would do the same.
Yeah, pretty much.
The most interesting thing I have... I mean, I'm a little behind on some work I wanted to do because I always overcommit, and I had migraines a couple days and got no work done. But I would say the most interesting thing I have is I made a New Year's resolution to quote unquote learn one kanji per day, and I put it in quotes because I don't expect to actually retain all of it. But it's largely practice for it's much more practical practice for learning hiragana and katakana compared to compared to just trying to learn them on their own. So like so far I've gotten through Kame, Ma, Abura, Inoko, Nishi, Tabi,
Ah,
Asobu, Shirusu, Mukashi, Mori, and Yuki.
cool.
And it's just been nice to just kind of, I pick a word, I look it up. I've learned the difference between kunyomi and onyomi forms. So now I can understand a little bit when people say that it's pronounced differently depending on depending on whether it's part of a word or not. So I'm learning a little bit about these linguistic things, as well as just learning to recognize different letters. Of course, there's a lot of letters, and if you're not using them in a useful way, it's hard to retain. So I think this is going to make it a bit easier to retain. Right, on tonight's show, we have our birthdays and news. Unfortunately, we do also have one lost story that snuck into the news today. We have some geek talk. We have our episode summary. Elements of Doctor Who, of course, because this is an animated reconstruction we're discussing. A bit of a historical fact check, because Alex went and found some information. And we have our review, final thoughts, and ratings. On to the birthdays.
Okay, starting with the final few from last year, on December 29th, we have first Mekki Pfeiffer, who played Rex Matheson in Torchwood Miracle Day, turned 50.
I think it's pronounced Mackay.
Ah.
At least that's how Eminem pronounces it. I don't know if he's right.
Also on the 29th, we have Bernard Cribbins, who played Tom Campbell in the Daleks' Invasion of Earth, 2150 AD, and better known as playing Wilfred Mott from 2007 to 2010, and then again in 2023. Plus worked for Big Finish. Would have been 96, but died in 2022 at the age of 93.
Aaron, I think your images are out of order.
Yeah, I'm looking at that here. Let me just see something. Shoot. I don't know.
Like, Mackay Pfeiffer's not a woman.
Yeah. Shoot, and I can't tell, like, I opened these. Did I open these? Did I not, like, put these in order? I thought I opened them up. Owen Exon, let me see here. Sorry, I'm spoiling all this stuff. So, Deborah Watling, Toby, okay. Martin, yep, that's him. I think unless something was, I think some of the stuff was snuck in here after I had already done like opening all of these links, so that's where everything got out of order.
I added 2 links, I think, after you said that you did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you and I were both on at the same time last night.
Think that's her. I can't tell. Yeah. Now I'm all out of whack here. Yeah.
It happens.
Was it Daisy? Okay, so Daisy Haggard.
Vivian O'Para first.
O'Para, I'm all messed up here. Yeah, like I had everything already opened up, so let me see here. Mekki Pfeiffer, Bernard Cribbins. Was it just Mekki Pfeiffer and Bernard? Because my first one was Vivian.
Ah.
So that was the first one that I had open. So here's Mekki. All right, and then here's Bernard. And that's it, right?
Those are the 2 I've done so far, yeah.
All right, and then I don't know. So after Vivian, we have. After Vivian, I believe
Yeah,
I
Vivian,
have.
I feel like is the only one I haven't seen show up on Twitch yet.
I have Dave Martin after Vivian. Yeah, because there's two in between. Why was she at
Like
the beginning?
I've seen
Dave
Daisy
is after
Haggard and
Sophie.
Sophie Okonedo show up like 5 times, but I haven't seen Vivian Opara on Twitch yet. I wonder if you. Well, no. Well,
yeah. Like, this is all messed up. I'm just gonna go through and reopen them all
yeah, it
up.
happens.
Cause, like, yeah.
Not to linger on that anymore. We know the problem, and yeah, no sense. No need to relitigate it.
Let me try doing this because I set up pretty early, so anything that's added is probably not going to be.
The only things that were added were the lost story, and I put a photo for the fact check. Those were the only things added.
I had lost story up. Someone was adding birthdays.
The birthdays were all done before you said that you had looked at them.
Well, yeah, but I had them all in order, which is kind of weird. So yeah, everything was in order before I went live. Okay, so there's Becky. There's Bernard. All right, there we go. I think that's the right photo for the upcoming one. Right? Vivian?
Yeah, that's Vivian Opara.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, on the 30th of December, we have Vivian Opara, who played Tanya in Class, plus work for Big Finish. Turned 28. Moving into 2025, we have 3 birthdays on New Year's Day. First up, we have Daisy Haggard, who played Sophie in The Lodger and Closing Time, turned 47. Also on the 1st of January, we had Sophie Okonedo, who played Liz 10 in Series 5, and Alison Cheney in Scream of the Shalka, turned 56. Also on the 1st of January, we have Dave Martin, who was a writer of 8 stories between 1971 and 79. And was one of the co-creators of K9. Would have been 90, but died in 2007 at the age of 72. Pardon me. On the 2nd of January, we have Toby Hadoke. Sorry if I got that wrong.
Yeah, I usually hear Hadoke.
Yeah. Was the moderator of the Doctor Who DVD commentaries from 2009 through to now. And played recurring characters in multiple Big Finish ranges, turned 51.
He also has another role related to the Doctor Who and the fandom, but that actually comes up later in the news today.
Yeah. Also on the 2nd of January, we have Deborah Watling, who played Victoria Waterfield from 67 to 68, plus work for Big Finish. Would have been 77, but died in 2017 at the age of 69. On the 6th of January, we have Rowan Atkinson, who played the 9th Doctor in Curse of Fatal Death, but of course more widely known as playing Mr. Bean and Blackadder. Turned 70. And finally, on the 8th of January, we have William Hartnell, the original Doctor from 63 to 66, and again in the 3 Doctors in 73. Would have been 117, but died in 1975 at the age of 67. So happy birthday to Meki or Mackay, Bernard, Vivian, Daisy, Sophie, Dave, Toby, Deborah, Rowan, and William. And as said before, we do unfortunately have a lost story. An Unearthly Podcast is saddened to announce the death of Barbara Clegg, a writer of the Fifth Doctor story Enlightenment, at the age of 98 on the 7th of January. Clegg was born in Manchester in March of 1926, the niece of the founder of the Littlewoods Empire, which, those unaware, I did a quick check. It was a retail chain that also did sports betting. After graduating from Oxford, she worked as an actress, performing in many Shakespeare plays and touring across the UK and Australia. She began her writing career writing radio plays in the 60s. Her first science fiction story was a 1981 radio adaptation of the novel The Chrysalids. 2 years later, she became the first woman to write for Doctor Who. She would later contribute the story Point of Entry for Big Finish. So condolences to her friends and family. But I mean, hey, she made it to 98. That's a pretty good run. It's a better run than a lot of people born around that time would have had.
Right.
So.
Especially those working in the Doctor Who studios in the 80s. Yeah. She might have been saved by only contributing one story to... no, because the radio might have been... I don't know if they would have had... they probably would have had asbestos in the radio studios as well.
And I guess it's a thing of... in the studios that the actors would have been in, she might not have necessarily ever been on set, depending on how they treated the writers with that.
Right. Moving on to our news. We do not have any episode news, but we do have a few pieces of alumni cast and crew news. First off, if you're not aware, Britain is still under a monarchy, and they actually still call themselves the British Empire. And they have basically an awards ceremony every year where they give out ranks related to the British Empire, which is why we call some people in entertainment Sir or Dame. And of course, for Doctor Who purposes, the most interesting one of these is that Tom Baker received his Member of the Order of the British Empire. So this is, I think it's the lowest rank on that particular scale. I think it's 2 steps below the one that actually would earn him the title of Sir. Several other figures related to Doctor Who and related properties were also recognized. Carmen Munro, who played Faria Naguib in The Enemy of the World, was made a Dame Commander. Stephen Fry, who voiced the Minister of Chance in Death Comes to Time and played C in Spyfall, was made a Knight Bachelor for his services to mental health awareness and the environment. And Eddie Marson, who voiced Mr. White in Goodbye Sarah Jane Smith, has been made an Officer of the Order of the British Empire. So, congratulations to them for being recognized in a way that is still really weirdly anachronistic.
Yeah. Okay. Out of curiosity, I did look it up. There's 5 ranks, and the member of the British Empire thingy is the lowest one. The MBE is the lowest, and then so the highest are Knight or Dame Grand Cross, then Knight or Dame Commander, Officer, Member.
I think Commander is when you get the Sir or Dame.
I didn't even realize that was Tom Baker. He looks so skinny now.
Yeah, he does, yeah. But healthy assuming that's a recent picture, he looks healthy for his age.
Yeah.
Also in our alumni cast and crew news, Toby Hidoke has published his annual Doctor Who in Memoriam video for 2024. Each year he publishes a video recognizing Doctor Who cast and crew that have died throughout the year. Most of these, at least assuming that our sources are, in any way accurate, will have been covered on this podcast. But those who are interested should definitely look it up on his YouTube channel and give it a look. And then our final piece of news is the Big Finish releases. So on December 29, they released the Paul Spragg Memorial Short Trip War Stories. So it is available for free due to being the Paul Spragg Memorial Trip for short trip for the year. It was written by, I feel like I have a typo, but I don't have I added an extra letter, but it didn't change the pronunciation. Written by Patrick Ross, narrated by Alan Cox, and featuring the 12th Doctor and Bill Potts. On December 30th, they released the audio version of the live show, The Stuff of Legend, which was written by Robert Valentine and starring Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor, India Fisher as Charlie, Alex McQueen as the Master, and of course, Nicholas Briggs as the Daleks. On January 2nd, they released the audiobook The Lord of Misrule, written by Paul Morris and narrated by John Culshaw, featuring the 4th Doctor, Romano 1, and Jago and Lightfoot. And finally, on January 7, they released First Doctor Adventures, The Living Darkness, written by Jacqueline Rayner, and starring Stephen Noonan as the First Doctor, Peter Purves as Stephen, and Lauren Cornelius as Dodo. And so that is the end of our news. Moving on to Geek Talk. I thought I was going to have 2 items, but I realized that the second one ends next Thursday or Friday, and not this past Thursday or Friday. So I have one, and that is Creature Commandos Season 1. So Creature Commandos is an animated show for Max, and at least I don't know if it might be airing on some sort of TV station. I don't really know at this point. But it was heralded as the first arrival of the new DC universe, the first entry into, the DC universe as overseen by James Gunn. However, within the first 5 minutes, it's pretty clear that this is a direct sequel to The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. So, arguably, The Suicide Squad is the first entry into the new DC universe. So the premise of this show is basically the U.S. government found out about the Suicide Squad and basically said, you can't, you cannot make humans join a Suicide Squad and perform missions for you. So Waller said, I bet. She got a bunch of people that were technically not considered human and made them into the Suicide Squad. For whatever reason, they don't do the whole bombs in the heads thing. I'm not entirely they don't really explain why, and maybe it's because Waller probably would have blown up the whole team within an hour of the first episode if that had been the case, or maybe it was they decided it was too extreme or something. I'm really not sure. But yeah, so this is basically another James Gunn Suicide Squad. Each episode, except for the first one is mainly an introduction of the concept. Each episode after that is basically, it's Highlander style. There's the backstory of a given character that's being focused on that day, plus the plot carrying on as it's going. Every single one of them has some sort of tragic backstory. For example, the bride is being chased throughout the entire show by what I can only describe as Incel Frankenstein. And I have not read any Frankenstein comics any DC comics featuring their version of Frankenstein. So I can't tell you if he's true to the comics. But basically, this is a version of Frankenstein that said, that is overly verbose, told Victor, basically, you need to make me a wife, and then got pissed off that she didn't fall in love with him, and then has made the past 200 years about chasing her and saying we're meant to be together. And of course, being a complete sociopath in the process. So I would say, first off, my initial criticism was that I was really especially in the very first episode or two, I was really I feel like I'm burning out of James Gunn dialogue. It was a perfect fit for the first Guardians of the Galaxy. it was a very good fit for the other Guardians of the Galaxy movies. It was an okay fit for Suicide Squad featuring, or for the Suicide Squad with characters like Peacemaker and Harley Quinn. I was starting to get tired of it by Peacemaker. And then I was just like, okay, this is just starting, like, the whole, like, everybody is flippant, nobody takes anything seriously style of writing was starting to grate on me. But then I feel like they kind of leaned back off of that. Like, it was almost like episode 1 was like, we need people to know this was written by James Gunn. And then after that, like, it's not like it did a complete change in writing style, but it was like it became a little bit more serious. It was like, we've hooked people. This can be a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more serious, and people can actually take things seriously again. So I appreciate that. I think I really would have been frustrated if it was, written in that style the whole 7 episodes. But yeah, it definitely, like, I would say I enjoyed it. I'm trying to think if there are major things. Like, watching the backstories was really interesting. I would say don't watch this if you're looking for, like, a pick-me-up. This is not a happy ending sort of story. I don't think the Suicide Squad stuff in general has been like that, but it's not going to make you feel positive about people or about the world, but it does tell a compelling story. Basically, there's this big plot going around about whether or not a given person is going to start World War III. And, therefore, whether her allies are the ones that need to be killed, or whether the people trying to stop that or the people trying to kill her are the ones needing to be killed. And I hope I kept that vague enough that I didn't say that it doesn't lead you to think which is correct or not. And of course, the subplot of Frankenstein trying to follow the bride around and convince her to marry him. Otherwise, yeah, it's I don't think I like it as much as Harley Quinn. Probably because Harley Quinn is a lesbian romance comedy, and I just probably enjoy that more than a nihilistic, depressing action comedy. But I enjoy it. I would potentially put it at least as high as Kite Man, maybe higher. If you have enjoyed the Suicide Squad, the one with the in front of it, the James Gunn one, and Peacemaker, then you would probably enjoy this.
I will say I'm just realizing that a particular casting for that cartoon is actually moving over into live action as well, because the guy who played Crossbones in the MCU is playing Rick Flag's dad and is the voice of him in Creature Commandos, but will also be playing him in live action in both Peacemaker and the Superman movie.
Oh, that makes sense. And of course, this is like the second or third thing with the Weasel played by Sean Gunn in it. And it relates to Doctor Who because Indira Varma plays the bride, and she, of course, has been in several things for Doctor Who. And I guess I should mention Alan Tudyk is in this, although he's still on my bad list for apparently being like Joss Whedon's closest friend. So I'm still not as hyped about him as I would have been before all that news came out.
I didn't realize Alan Tudyk was on the shit list.
It's like he hasn't, like nothing's known about him necessarily doing anything or knowing about anything. But when you're close friends with a victimizer, you start to wonder, like, what exactly do you know and when did you know it?
Or I guess it's also a matter of like, are you actually distancing yourself from this guy now that you do know all this?
Right.
Or are you still associating?
And that and it's hard to get public knowledge about that when, unless Joss Whedon is publicly making a bunch of movies and shows right now, which I don't think he is, it's going to be hard to tell who's associating with him or not.
Right.
Moving on from there, we have video games, and of course, Aaron alluded to this earlier.
So, yes, I did allude to the fact that I finally, after nearly 2 years of trying to get it done, I did finally freaking finish Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. I've been trying to stream it for quite a while now. But just stuff kept getting in the way, and of course the usual I don't really want to do this today's feeling. So I played it on the story mode setting, which was a fairly easy preset setting. It wasn't exactly Dark Souls hard, but the puzzles that you could set it pretty easy, but like the puzzles are still can be difficult unless you remember that you have certain powers that you can use. Again, that probably won't be an issue if you're consistently playing it. But yeah, like I like the combat, I like the puzzles. I even enjoyed some of the platforming, and I'm terrible at platforming. Yeah, I thought it was a good game, a really good game, probably one of my favorites because I kept at it for a while. And you see here, I know one of my viewers was upset about the ending. They did not like the ending. They thought it was a little too nice. You know, usually you have a more tragic ending, to kind of this kind of darker history of the Star Wars lore. But it was actually kind of a little bit more uplifting than I was expecting. So yeah, definitely give it a try. It's I give it a must play. I finished almost all of the maps except for Zepho and got a lot of achievements out of it. So yeah, check it out.
What sort of like gameplay style / genre would you say it is?
It's supposed to be Souls like, so Dark Souls hard.
Okay.
So, but they do have various settings for it. So it doesn't apparently the setting I was on, it was still fairly difficult for me because I usually play games on normal settings. And it was still kind of difficult for me, but like once I got all the powers unlocked, because you can make it artificially hard too. You can go to the more difficult planets before unlocking everything. So you can make it as hard or as easy as you want it to, and I made it pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it wasn't, I got frustrated. There was, like the black from the controller was coming off on my fingers at one point. So, but it wasn't something that I felt was impossible. I knew people could do it. So,
yeah, like, I mean, one of the annoying things about that game is I think you can accidentally, like, jump off the edge of the map and die without meaning to.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I don't think there are invisible walls to prevent that. It's like you can just kind of plummet. Like you can't like fall off. You would actively have to like jump or something, I think. But yeah, it's still like, oh.
I learned that my timing was terrible. I knew that from rhythm games. I'm terrible at rhythm games. But man. So I can't, there's a book that comes between this and Survivor, so I'm going to be listening to the book on Audible and then moving on to Jedi Survivor. In the meantime, streaming a few other different games, so.
And like I've been exposed to some of the characters in this game. Would you say the story is good and that it's satisfying, or would you say that you mainly would play the game for the action and not the story?
I think it was, I played it mostly for the action and like the platforming and stuff. Towards the end, once I was actually like, I don't know, once I was actually getting into it, that I found myself enjoying the gameplay more than the story, but the story isn't bad. I liked it. And like I said, it's a little bit more uplifting than you would expect in like the Dark Times part of the lore. So, and that's, I will tell you this, the ending did have my heart pounding, even though I was on the easiest settings and I knew, you know, the checkpoints are very forgiving in this game too. So you don't have to start too far back if you die. But man, like that's the ending is like I don't want to give too much away because it is kind of a fun ending too. So, but yeah, check it out. It's got a lot of cool stuff in it. Characters are all very likable in my opinion.
It's. I will say I was someone who, when I first played it, maybe it's just me, but I think I'm getting kind of sick of like how many people have survived Order 66.
Oh yeah,
Because like you're playing
Yeah.
as a Jedi who survived it, and it like it's at the point that like one channel I occasionally watch has a video of like here's over 180 characters that survived the purge.
Is that
And
is
I'm
that all of
like,
continuities or just the reboot continuity?
I think it might be a mix of both rather than just one. But it's still like it's very. I remember Linkara once joking like, "Are we sure that Krypton actually blew up at this point?" And that feels very. It's very that kind of energy where it's like, "Are we sure anyone that we didn't see die on screen actually died?"
I mean, to be fair,
Purge?
every time we see the Inquisitors in a show or a game, they lose to the good guys. So maybe they just maybe Vader was the only one who was competent at his job.
I mean,
Maybe.
kinda. I mean, I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to spoil it. Do you want me to give you a small spoiler? Crickets.
Well, I mean, I'm probably like, for one thing, it's been 6 years, and for another thing, like I said, Galaxy of Heroes has introduced me to a lot of the characters so far. I just don't know the plot.
Yeah, so like basically you go to get the holocron because the Inquisitor has taken the holocron. The Inquisitor of the Day, Trilla, has taken the holocron and stored it in a palace under the water. So you fight her, and then all of a sudden Vader shows up behind her. And it's like, basically, you failed me, kills her, and then you have to fight Vader. And pro tip, you can't really fight Vader. You can only really just run away from him and hope that something happens to save you. So that's the heart pounding part of it. And he's very scary, and well, very scary. He's fairly scary in this. Like there are jump scares with him where he just comes in out of nowhere. Like you think you've gotten away and you haven't. They do manage to it's the palace is underwater, so you're running down a hallway, which is basically a glass tube. You punch out the side of the tube, and he's busy holding back the water so that he doesn't drown, and that's how you escape from him. So and everybody, all of the main characters, all 5, I believe, they all have kind of fake, or most of them have fake deaths and whatnot, but everybody survives in the end. So. Everybody lives just for one day.
Damn it, Moffat, you wrote this too?
I mean, it is better than Moffat writing, I will tell you that. At least. So.
All right, now we're on to the summary. And thanks to the amount of time we chatted before the podcast started, the summary is also the perfect time for me to take my bathroom break.
Let me see here. Finding a stopwatch. Stopwatch app. All right. So, whenever you're ready, Alex.
Yep. Preemptively, and I said this in text either late last night or this morning, it was getting a bit much to try and summarize or write out a summary for this. So to be honest, I'm just going to cheat and read the wiki summary.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Oh, okay. So 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, the TARDIS lands in Tibet in the Himalayas, where the second Doctor finds a dead body amid the remains of a campsite. The Doctor arrives at the Detson Monastery. I'll get to this later. Where he meets Professor Edward Travers, who is attempting to find the Yeti. It appears there have been some deaths recently, but the Professor says the Yeti cannot be the culprit because of its shy nature. Meanwhile, Jamie and Victoria find a cave in which they discover a chamber containing a pyramid of metal spheres. Suddenly, a Yeti moves the boulder that blocked the cave. They escape and head towards a monastery. The Doctor has been accused of controlling the Yeti and placed on trial. Jamie and Victoria convince Professor Travers that the Doctor is no threat. The trio return to the monastery and show the sphere to the Doctor, who turns it over to the monks. Padma Sambhava, the immortal master of the monastery, instructs one of the monks, Tomney, to release the Doctor. Shortly afterward, the Yeti attack the monastery, during which one of them is overpowered and rendered dormant. The Doctor deduces it is a robot controlled by a missing spherical unit from its chest cavity. And Padma Sambhava orders all the monks to evacuate. When the Doctor and Jamie reach the TARDIS, they find it guarded by another Yeti, but the Doctor takes out its control sphere. They head back to the monastery, where the Doctor forges an alliance with Kree Song, the head of the monastery guards, based on the need to enable the monks to stay out of the monastery. Realizing the monks will not leave peacefully, Abbot Songsten, who is controlled by Padma Sambhava, opens the gates of the monastery to more Yeti. Victoria realizes Padma Sambhava is the one commanding the Yeti robots. He wipes her mind at the meeting and summons more Yeti to attack. Doctor helps Victoria recover from her trance-like state and listens to Travers, who is recovering his senses and explains about the cave and the pyramid. The Doctor pieces together the nature of the threat, while Travers recalls that Songsten was in the cave too. It is clear Songsten is the link between the Yeti and the monastery. The Doctor and his friends arrive and overpower Songsten. Songsten is then bound and returned to the other monks, and the violence of his manner persuades them that he is the threat to Detson. The Doctor, Tomney, and Jamie destroy the equipment being used to control the robotic Yeti. Left in peace as the great intelligence which is controlling him and keeping alive is forced to leave, Padma Sambhava dies. With the danger over, the travelers depart, with Travers accompanying them up the mountain, and his belief in the real Yeti is renewed when he spots one. Charges off to investigate as the TARDIS departs, and we end on a shot of one of the Yeti starting to stir. The end.
Okay. So you did that in 3 minutes, 26 seconds, and 22 nano? I don't know what that would be. Check a sentence?
Yeah.
They would be, it's in hundredths of a second, so centiseconds.
Centiseconds, okay. So,
yeah.
3,
I added I added like a little bit from that wasn't in the, mainly just the end bit because the end shot wasn't mentioned. Which makes me wonder if that was an addition for the animation or not. But yeah, otherwise I was just basically reading from the wiki because I forgot how many times I was gonna have to read that damn name.
I was sitting there. I was like, you could have saved yourself some effort by saying the great intelligence a couple of times, but you went for the Padma Sambhava instead.
Yeah. So I guess moving on to that right off the gate for the historical fact check, they keep referring to the monastery as the Detsen Monastery. Mm-hmm. Best I can gather, Detsen was the name of the monarch. It was the apologies for this entire section because there's a lot of Tibetan, Indian, etc., like that part of the world names that I'm going to have to say, and I've never heard them said before, so there's probably going to be a hell of a lot of bad pronunciation, so bear with me. But seemingly the name was Sri Song Detsen, seemingly the 38th Emperor of Tibet, was the Emperor of Tibet when this monastery was built. And this is supposed to be the first. If this is the one associated with Padma Sambhavar, then this is the Samye Monastery, which I showed an image in the Discord chat, but I think it was in the spoilers. Where was it?
Yeah, I think it was in the spoiler chat.
Yeah, spoiler chat. It was. Mind you, that's obviously a more modern photo, but I will admit, the look of the monastery being off, I can forgive somewhat because this was 60s Doctor Who.
Right.
It was only so
it was
much
Wales.
money. Yeah, they're filming it in Wales. I mean, I don't. When the Doctor looks over the thing at the monastery, I'm wondering if that was like a model that he was technically staring down at, because we don't see him in the same shot. But they obviously filmed some of the. Well, actually, no, I don't know if they filmed much of the outside scenes. Like at the gate of the monastery, which I guess that's all they would have had to construct, is like the front bit, because that's all you really see.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like they have it basically be on a cliff out in up in the mountains, whereas it was on kind of a flat plain. Now, mind you, I don't know what the incline is like in that part of.
And I think it's definitely at that point where we start splitting hairs rather than looking at the story.
Right. But it is it's one of those things where I can forgive the monastery not being entirely accurate, because one, this was the 60s. Two, the budget was that low that there's no way. Even maybe they could done model shots, but even then, the amount of sets they probably would have had to make this place look bigger probably wouldn't have been.
And they were having
feasible.
enough trouble with so the location they used, they had basically chosen a location. They were like, oh, it's going to look like, a snowy Tibetan countryside. And then it rained for 2 weeks. So by the time they got there, it was just muddy. Right. Which is why, the script is talking about snow, and there, all of this, and there's no snow anywhere in the live action. I forgot to check if the animation intentionally adds snow. I think it does. I think remember a few scenes like the very end it's like a blizzard, which is very clearly not the case in the live action.
Right. And there's a lot of even though you can still see a ton of grass, there's still snow-covered rocks here and there. And that kind of thing, which is a matter of they're I think even someone joked when I brought this up elsewhere that there probably wouldn't have been much snow on those mountains in Wales in September. So but yeah, again, that's just a matter of that's what they had to film with. They weren't exactly gonna fucking fly them to Tibet.
I'm guessing there's not many ski resorts in England to film on, or at least not that the BBC could easily afford.
Either not that they could easily afford, or not feasible for shooting in winter anyway. I can think of one in Wales and Snowdon, but I don't know how good that would have been for filming. Plus, there's a railway.
Snowdon is real?
There,
it's
so
not in the underground?
God, what was I thinking? Oh, well, I've already forgotten. But I mean, yeah, that all aside, the other funny thing was I will admit, at first when I watched this through the first time, I just assumed that Padma Sambhavar was someone that they possibly made up, but no.
Right.
This there is, even on the Wikipedia page, there is a link to a page for that person, and seemingly it is a matter of, and they say it pretty early even in the wiki page, that they are semi-legendary, which to me says there was an actual person called that has been like mythologized after the fact.
So I feel like that's the case with a lot of Buddhist figures, and maybe Hindu figures as well. Like the Buddha was an actual person, was then made into a god after his death, and such like that.
Right. But the funny thing about this story is that from what I can see that it lists this, is that the actual person was around, especially around in Tibet, circa the 8th to 9th centuries. This story is set in 1930, which at first I didn't know, but then rewatching, the Doctor does specifically mention that he was previously there during an attack, or was there around the time of an attack that happened in 1630, and this is supposed to be 300 years after, so that would be 1930. Which means that Web of Fear happens in 1970, regardless of when they actually say it happens. But point being, this person if the actual person who existed, I'm pretty sure the idea is they have evidence that they can point to now to say, yes, no, there was actually a person who went by that who did exist. Existed pre the year 1000. So, the fact that the Doctor would have met them in the 1600s and then been shocked that they were like still alive 300 years later is a bit odd, because he would have already been over 1,000 years old. Or roughly, like, or getting on there. So it's like, hang on.
I wonder if that had to do with, like, I wonder if that had, like, there's a certain draft of the story that was set, like, during a time when that, would have actually made sense. And they were like, oh no, but we actually want to have a sequel later on, so let's set it during the 20th century.
Yeah, like, mind you, I feel like I know someone mentioned that seemingly they have, like, I don't know as if they tried to add in a bit of a retcon to make the timeline make sense, or if they use these characters again in a Big Finish story. And they basically said that, like, this was like an incarnation of Padma Samsava. So the idea of, like, this is a reincarnation of that the Doctor met, rather than the, like, original guy, which would make a lot more sense. If we're taking, like, Buddhism into account. That it's like, okay, which it's a whole other tangent that I won't go into, but just as I joked in the chat, from some very brief reading I did on something else. Wow, yeah, the Barry Letts making the Time Lords lean a bit Buddhist was actually kind of had some decent foundations to it, given how some of these things can work, and like some of the beliefs and stuff like that actually ties in with the Time Lords pretty well.
I should mention that the TARDIS entry on Padmasambhava makes it even more confusing. The earliest part of his life that they describe, Padmasambhava traveled the higher realms for centuries. In 1625, he returned to the physical plane to take up residence at Detsen Monastery. So, if you combine this with the Wikipedia article about the real person, you might say, okay, he lived in, I forget, when did you say he originally lived?
Somewhere between the 8th and 9th centuries.
So maybe in the 9th century, his physical body died. He astral projected for 700 years, 800 years, came back in order to be a monk and meet the doctor, and then lived in Tibet ever since. Maybe that's what they're implying, but just having only read the TARDIS entry, I was so confused.
Yeah.
And this is there's a novel, Night of the Intelligence, and there's an audio, The Secrets of Det Sen, which seems to be what expanded on this episode's lore.
And yeah, it's one of those things where I give a bit of leeway for these seeming inaccuracies, and really in the case of like Padma Sambhavar, it really is just a matter of like, had they just had a throwaway line of this is not the original, this is like a reincarnation, that would have been made a bit more sense. Rather than like this is just the person who is currently claiming to be, rather than like the original person. And you know, again, the difference being I can just look this up on Wikipedia or Google it, whereas in the 60s they couldn't exactly do that. They just had to go by whatever knowledge they might have had. Whereas if this had been done in even the Barry Letts era, because he was like so into Buddhism, maybe that would have been handled a bit better. But even then, 70s, internet didn't exist yet. Were you really going to have all the info you needed to get that right? Mind you, there are some modern Who stories that kind of still fudge that, even though they have way easier access to stuff. But yeah. No overarching thing, but yeah, like that timeline stuff threw me way off until I realized what the years they were actually going with. It's just that they don't really line up with the historical figure that actually did seem, from what I can recall reading, seems to have actually existed. So it's a bit wonky there. As far as the clothing goes, I didn't end up looking that up, but it would not shock me if the clothing was.
It was whatever the BBC had lying around for stories set in the Buddhist world.
Pretty much. I will say, as far as surviving, but this is less historical fact check and more like a very quick, I guess, just dipping into the elements of Doctor Who animation aspect of this. I'm realizing in hindsight that there was maybe one. There might have been more, but there was definitively at least one actor and it was the guy who played Tomney, is the only one that I could verify was not white. As far as like people that they actually had in the original live action. There might have been others. It wouldn't surprise me if some of the monks that have no dialogue at all were maybe like of East or South Asian descent.
And you would think, you would think the BBC has easy access to maybe not Tibetan actors, but Indian.
Right.
And,
especially the funny thing is apparently the guy who played Padma Sambhavar was Ukrainian. But the actual Padma Sambhavar, they could have just got an Indian actor to play him because apparently he was Indian.
To be fair, it seemed like they were trying to portray him as like Nosferatu almost.
Oh, well, yeah. Like I
don't know if
I guess I mean like
accuracy was super needed there.
Right. I think it's more like because I don't know if the animation added in elements that were not shown in the original or not, like how they show like the Great Intelligence taking over, like sort of merging with him in the astral plane. I don't know if that would, and we don't know unless there are like stills showing it. If there was a shot there, if there was, then I guess that would have just been the actor out of makeup. But that was one where I was like, oh, okay, so that definitely would have been someone who you probably would have got. Like having someone of Indian descent would have made a bit more sense for that shot in Thingo. But I guess going into the animation, that is effectively one benefit of the animation, is rather than a bunch of white people in yellow or brown face, which some you can kind of tell even though it's black and white, are definitely, interestingly enough, the abbot is very white, like very obviously just a white dude who I don't even think they tried to make brown or yellow face, thank God, but it's still just kind of awkward. Whereas they have him with a much darker skin tone within the actual story, within the animated reconstruction, I mean. Which on one hand is like, okay, so it's probably slightly more accurate, but at the same time is also like, it almost is a bit awkward to have the guy with the darkest skin tone be effectively one of the bad guys of the story. Whereas everyone's a lot lighter. Outside of like one of the older monks. But yeah, that in its own right is a bit wonky, but like, yeah. I'll at least take that they go out of their way to be like, okay, this is animation, let's actually make them look like they're from this part of the world.
Which, on one hand, as somebody who has to make title cards for podcasts, it can be very annoying when voice actors play characters that don't look like them. But in all other aspects of life, it's very common for people to, voice act a character that looks nothing like them. So,
Right.
I think it's much more reasonable in animation than, the whole
yeah.
the actors in brown face thing that the BBC had going for some stories.
I was actually just thinking about that. I didn't know how to put it into words, but I'm like, I'm watching the animated version. I'm like, well, at least I don't have to watch brownface.
Yeah. I will also add, while initially watching like comparing the one surviving episode live action to the animated, the Yeti, the sort of like it's usually just referred to as like the Yeti jacket or Yeti coat or whatever, that the Doctor wears. Like, as much as it doesn't look as good in the animation, because to be fair, on the very low budget they would have been doing the animation, yeah, you weren't going to be able to make it look like that. I give them credit for at least making the Yeti and the Doctor's coat similar, because otherwise, because that's the point. It's like the Yeti, the coat he's wearing is supposed to look like what the Yeti are made of. So they went like, okay, well, we're not going to be able to recreate those on this cheap animation. So instead, we'll make the Yeti look like this. So now the Doctor's coat needs to look like this. They at least kept that element of it consistent. So I give them credit for that.
All right, so at this point, I guess it's we've heard your thoughts on the animation, so we move to Aaron. What are your thoughts on the animation?
I thought it was actually really good. I was very pleasantly surprised with this. Is one of the newer animations, right? I believe.
Let's
This
like
one
there's
came
two
out
more
in
that
either. I think this one came out in 2022, if not 2021.
yeah, I really like
22,
the
yeah.
yeah, I like the Archer-esque kind of flash animation. I watched the black and white version. So yeah, and that turned out really well. I like how the Yetis move cuz they kind of they kind of seem like they're still kind of people in costumes almost when they move, or that there's something kind of mechanical about them. They kind of look like fluffy like plushies walking around, so I thought they were super cute. Um but like there's little touches in the animation, like for example the Yeti's standing in front of the TARDIS and you can see like the wind just kind of blowing the fur on it, which, as it just stands stock still. And it's supposed to kind of show that this thing is not moving right now. So I thought that was a really good touch. The facial expressions were really well done, especially on Victoria, especially when she's like stuck in when she's interacting with Jamie, or like when she's stuck in the cave with him, and you can see her, like her expression changes, like, oh, I'm not afraid, and then he walks away and she visibly changes expression to look afraid. Like, yeah, I thought that was really well done with her. So what else was there? And also I think it built on the atmosphere too. Like you said, they were able to add more snow and stuff in the animated version.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also more it's also in the live action version, but it's more so in the animated version, a sense of isolation and loneliness. Especially, yeah, like comparing the color screenshots that I found to the black and white version. Um, just everything feels kind of dingy and empty and kind of just worn with age. So I thought that came across very well.
Okay. So mine, I'll start with one of my for the BBC Studios stuff, I complained about like the faces and the expressions, and that they it wasn't portraying, one, it wasn't differentiating between people very well, and two, that the expressions and emotions were not being portrayed very well. And this one being Big Finish Creative, I think they did a much better job of that. It was you could clearly distinguish between different people. The emotions, there was a lot of animation, a lot of changes as they emoted. I think this was like the last story animated before BBC Worldwide pulled their funding for the animations. So it is possible this was a more expensive animation than, say, the Underwater Menace. I can't necessarily tell about that. Um, let's see. If I had one issue, it's that sometimes like people seem like overly like skinny cartoony, like uh Scooby-Doo-ish. Uh and this is especially the case like looking at like Padma Sambhava, where I'm like, okay, it's supposed to be a real person, but he's animated like, a zombie almost. Um, I don't think that really heavily detracts from things, but it's just kind of an example of like they're very clearly not going for hyperrealism. They're just really looking at it like this is an animated product. This is a cartoon. We're making a cartoon. The Yeti at the end, it very much looked very Hanna-Barbera. And I think they pretty much succeeded in that. I do think that the robot Yetis is Yetis the plural or is Yeti the plural? I'm not sure.
Hmm.
But the robots, I think they did have less personality than the live action ones. But maybe that's just the live action ones are a little campy. And these were, they didn't have to deal with physical restrictions, but like the live action ones always feel like they have so much personality, and maybe they were intentionally going for that. Like they're not supposed to have personality; they're robots, which I think we even talked about that in the Web of Fear review. That like almost seemed like a downgrade to the new Yetis. So, yeah, I think that I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have to add to that. I do wonder about some of the things, like in terms of how much was added or not, like whether the flashback scene was there, whether things like Padmasambhava flying into the air and glowing was part of the original or not. I definitely don't remember the telesnaps at all, so not sure. Now we move on to what we liked about the episode, and we are well, actually, no, we're not as far in as I thought we were. But yeah, we just don't want to be super overly verbose. So, all right, Alex, what did you like about this story?
I didn't necessarily think I'd say this, but Victoria is probably the most interesting portrayal of, like, I forget how many of her stories I've seen, not that she's in like a ton. But I remember just thinking, like, as it goes on, I'm just like, huh. Victoria's actually very interesting in this story. Like, yeah, she still plays like a little bit of a damsel role, but like, you know, she's the one who gets Jamie to leave the TARDIS so they can have a look around. And ends up with them going up to the cave and all that, and she's a bit more proactive. Like, at first I did kind of laugh off her trying to sneak into the sort of the master's chambers, as it were. But given how old she probably was, and also just being white, like, I remember joking to myself, like, yeah, of course you say, no, don't go in here. Of course, like, a white woman from a very specific privileged background, like she seemed to have, would be like,
I think her
"You're not
father
gonna
owned
do
the
that."
manor that they
Yeah,
were in Evil of the Daleks.
right. So like that kind of upbringing with some degree of privilege would have been like very, well, don't go in there. Like, of course she's gonna want to go in there now, especially if she's supposed to be a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always assume she's like 16-ish. And even if she's not, like at the absolute oldest, she's 18. And for the time period, it's like, yeah, I could say, like, generally it's nice that she just kind of generally, and it's even kind of set up by the fact that she's like, oh, I want to see where these tracks go, is very, I don't feel like she's had an inquisitive mind before in any of the stories I've seen. So this being her being like, oh, I'm bored, let's go and check this out, was a very interesting thing, given that most of the time, yeah, she's basically written as she exists to be there, get captured, and scream. So it was nice that she had more dimensions to it this time.
So there's a novelization that places her as being 14 or 15,
Ah.
but I don't know if that date was official or agreed upon by when this was actually happening.
Ah.
Because I'm make sure Downtime is the story. I think it is. Yeah, so it was the novelization of a non-canon, probably technically unlicensed film. So it's in a very apocryphal source.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of Victoria, what I was kind of paying attention to was that there was a sort of hierarchy. And it kind of makes sense when you look at it as the Doctor. Obviously, this is like his 30th plus adventure. Jamie, it's his 8th adventure, and Victoria, it's her 3rd. So it makes sense that there's a hierarchy, but it's, The doctor is pretty much obviously being active and sticking his nose into literally everything. Jamie is like the second in command, and he actually takes down 2 Yeti pretty much by his decision, by his actions. And then like the 2 of them like go off and they just leave Victoria behind. And I'm like, oh yeah, she's the new rookie. She has to like sit and be a prisoner while they're going out and doing things. But yeah, that definitely the looking at it, yeah, focusing on her actions definitely adds another dimension to that. Aaron, what did you like about this story?
I like actually how the doctor is portrayed in this because he is the type of the doctor is kind of helpless in a lot of situations. I mean, he certainly isn't kind of the demigod like being we saw in David Tennant, and I think probably also freaking Peter Capaldi was also pretty powerful. Yeah, he and even he's not even the chess master at this point. He's just like, I'm going to see if this works, and hopefully it does. He's the risk taker basically. And he's also comes off as very vulnerable, and that vulnerability increases the sense of danger that the overall serial has. It's just like there is a very real sense that the doctor could fail. He could be crushed by stones. He could be killed by one of the Yetis. So, so
I do. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, it's like it's definitely a thing of this is still while the Doctor is always, and even the second Doctor does still have like a very big ego. There are a lot of instances in this story, especially where he is like, rather than being like, oh yes, of course I know exactly what I'm doing. There's a lot of, so is this actually going to work? Well, let's hope so.
What you mean? And part of that, like, he's not the chess master of the 7th Doctor, but he is the Doctor that like will play up his he will play up his foolishness, and he will at times absolutely know something will work and then pretend that he's not sure about it for the sake of either keeping his enemies in the dark or keeping people guessing, etc. So
yeah.
But what I was gonna say, this is another thing where I feel like you zeroed in on different parts than I did. Because what stood out to me was the part where the Great Intelligence was just like the Doctor he has a more complex, higher mind compared to humans. It's difficult for me to deal with and to predict, and I don't know what he's going to do. So even here, like you have you're not quite to like the modern Who interpretation of the Doctor, but they're already laying the crumbs to be like, this is, it's not just a very smart human. He's, they may not have the term the Time Lords yet, but he's from something that is much more advanced than a human. What I like about this story is I like kind of the way they deal with the character roles. So by what I mean, like you have Padma Sambhava, he's the Doctor's old friend, but he's also in many ways the antagonist of the story. Like not necessarily directly, because it's the Great Intelligence is the real antagonist. But still, like Padma Sambhava is functionally the antagonist. And did I really close the episode page again? I swear I open and close these things like 25 times per podcast. So like Padma Sambhava, you'd think is the one that's going to be helping out, and he turns out to be, in many cases, the antagonist. And then you have somebody like Krisong, who like he comes off as the antagonist, right? He's like, we need to kill the Doctor. We need to be. He's very aggressive. The the warmonger. But by the end of the story, he's like their biggest ally. He's, working with them to try to figure out what is going on. And then he gets stabbed or lightly tapped on the back and then dies, as the animation shows. So they really kind of play with it's not just the expected obvious stereotypical roles, but the characters are making decisions based on their motivations and the information in front of them. And so it's a bit more complex, which is kind of difficult, I think, to do in a story with this many characters.
Yeah.
All right, Alex, what do you dislike about this story?
Hmm. It's hard to zero in on a specific thing for me. So I think I'll just go with, and it's kind of low-hanging fruit, given what the 60s era of Doctor Who had this as kind of a recurring problem. And for me, it's more of a nitpick because it doesn't bother me as much with this story as others, but this is definitely a 6-parter that didn't necessarily need to be. I don't
It's
think
a season 5 story, is what you're saying.
Yeah, like this. I will say, like I had someone bring it up in a way that seemed like they think that this should have been a 4-parter. I feel like this probably still could have justified being 5 rather than 6, because I feel like it almost feels like, okay, like when you get to the 5th episode, it feels like, well, this should be where it starts to wrap up, right? But then we've still got 1 episode left. So I'm like, okay, yeah, they probably could have trimmed some of this down and made this 5 parts instead of 6.
Like Victoria escaping from being a prisoner multiple times, or
Yeah.
the time they spent half an episode playing hide and seek with a ball.
Right, yeah, there's bits and pieces, and even then it almost feels like I almost do wonder if this was written to be like 4 or 5, and then, as is standard with this era of Doctor Who, whoops, we had this one fall through, so now this needs to be 2 episodes longer. Because it almost does feel like it's gearing up to end in part 5, and then it just keeps going. So it wouldn't surprise me if this is meant to be slightly shorter.
By comparison, the previous story was a 4-parter, and that was the season opener. And then the rest of the season is 6-parters. And of course, it's season 5, so they're all base under siege stories.
Yeah.
The previous season was a little better. They might not have been quite as stretched for budget in season 4. Season 6, we have a 5, an 8, a 4, a 6, a 6, a 10.
And the 10 was definitely them having cut both a 6 and a 4.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the invasion is probably the longest story that actually does its job. But even the invasion probably could have stood to be a 6-parter or a 5-parter.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like it's like it's kind of a broken record because a lot of this era does have that kind of a problem of stories being longer than they need to, and half the time, like, it's not always, I have to believe. Sometimes they were probably just like, you've got 6 episodes, make a story. Or maybe given an idea and being like, now flesh that out into 6 episodes. I mean, like, I know Terrence Dix is admitted to cheating a bit with the whole court get freed thing before. But yeah, it is one of the, like, again, like me personally, I don't feel it as bad with this story as some six-parters of the era. There are definitely worse offenders, but I can definitely see that this does kind of feel like it probably could have cut at least an episode.
All right. Aaron, what did you dislike?
Overall, I didn't have a lot of dislikes about it. I quite enjoyed it. I think I'm going to say that Tonmi, the younger monk, was a bit harsh with Victoria a lot, or a few times, especially when she tried to go near the abbot and the secret chamber. So, yeah, I'm going to say that. There wasn't a lot of
Although
stuff that I
his
hated.
job specifically was mainly to keep her away from that chamber. So.
She also would occasionally mock him to, like, when she would, like, start laughing and he'd be like, I'm serious. So yeah, yeah, there's not a lot that I didn't like about the serial, so uh sorry about that.
All right. So my biggest issue, and I don't know how specific this is to the animated version or not. Obviously, the only version that would be better and would be live action when you can see everybody's mouth moving, but the sound mixing. I had to turn the volume way up every time Padmasambhava spoke because I couldn't hear what he was saying if I kept it at a normal volume. But then I had to be careful to turn the volume way down before Victoria screamed again, or else I was going to blow out my ears and wake up my neighbors or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
like,
it just, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, like it definitely says something that there are some movies that I will put on my PS5 now that I have to use that at the moment instead of my Blu-ray player because my remote for that's buggered at the moment. Where I have to turn the volume way up to hear anything because of how the PS5 likes and the PS4 before it like to be with movies like that. This, I had to keep consistently turning. Like, I did not have... I had it about as loud as I would normally. And I could hear it both fine, but then also had that problem of it dipping and then going way up and then dipping and then going way up. And yeah, so it's... I almost wonder if that's just a matter of... Like, I could see that being both a matter of the issue of the original mix, possibly, but also just the condition of the surviving audio.
I wonder if somebody had to record this at home and that's the only surviving version.
And like that would also explain why to a degree I think as well, the one surviving episode, when you compare that, everything for pretty much obvious reasons, I feel all the stuff they filmed on location looks great, sounds great. When it goes into the studio, ugh, it looks a bit rough. But at least the quality of the footage looks a bit rougher, and it's like because it's studio footage from the 60s, so in the version of it that they found, I guess the studio footage was did not age as well as I think it was like I think I read that this is the last time they used 35mm film to shoot on location. And after that they used 16mm film. But yeah, so it was a stark contrast watching the surviving episode and just, wow, this footage looks really great. Ooh. And then they go back to the studio and it looks a bit wonky.
But yeah, another part of my initial point, and this is why I was comparing like live action to animated to telesnaps. It's easier to tell what somebody is saying when they're talking softly if their mouth is mimicking it. And this is where like the audio did a good enough job where like their mouths were moving realistically. It wasn't like some of the Big Finish Studios stuff. And I'm picking on Big Finish Studios, but that's also because that's fresh in my memory. Because that's what we had last time. But a lot of the time, and this is part of just how it was scripted or how it was directed, Padmasambhava is not visible, or you only see his hand when he's speaking because they don't want you to know what's. They want it to be mysterious and to keep up the mood. But that makes it twice as hard to understand what he's saying.
Yeah.
All right, favorite scenes, Alex.
You know what? I'm purely gonna go with it because she actually got me, and that's Victoria's fake out poisoning.
Okay.
Like, I legitimately bought because of like probably because of all the crap Victoria's had to put up with. I could totally buy that someone had tried to do that to her. So when it turned out to be a fake out, I was like, you know what? They got me. Like she played that very well. Like the animation plays it off pretty well, and just Deborah Watling's acting still comes through of playing that 100% serious.
Yeah, she definitely is the punching bag / screamer of the episode. She's taken prisoner, escapes, gets taken again. She gets hypnotized. I think she might be the first. I'm not sure if she's the first companion to be hypnotized or not, but.
But yeah, and I guess the additional upside of that is for a character that is usually captured a lot, she actually manages to free herself in that instance.
All right, Aaron, what's your favorite scene?
Favorite scene? Geez, I actually have quite a few of them. Gosh, I think the one scene that was just really kind of funny was the doctor is hypnotizing Victoria, and he turns around and sees that Jamie's fallen asleep and just smacks him. He's like, "Not you." It was just great.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just kind of a surprise bit of humor too, and this in a pretty intense scene too, where he's trying to help Victoria, and they're actually going into quite a bit of detail about what he's telling Victoria and stuff. It's not like, you're going to do this and you'll forget everything and then snap my fingers. No, he actually is having to describe what's going on in her mind.
It's not a 2011 script where I headbutted you. Now you are free of the hypnosis.
Yeah, pretty much.
So my favorite scene, I should have spent more time thinking about this. I guess I'll go with, I think, the first appearance, because I had to look at this scene a few times for putting together the opening. I think the first scene of the Yeti is pretty good. Like, it's pretty imposing. They're just like in this cave. You see the Yeti roll open, slowly approach. Getting bigger because of the camera angle, and so forth. Like, it's not a complex scene. It's not like a super involved writing scene, but I thought it was carried off fairly well. All right, least favorite scenes, Alex.
I probably had a different one, and it's more of a nitpick because it's just a matter of like kind of annoying in hindsight, but it's also like, it's like when they get to the cave initially and Jamie wants to have a look inside, and suddenly Victoria, who's the sole reason they're here in the first place, just changes her mind all of a sudden because she has to go back to damsel mode. Of like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to go in there. It's like all of a sudden, even though she was the one who was dragging Jamie along
Yeah.
at first, it's like, come on. Like, you could have had her be like wary without her just immediately going into, oh no, I'm scared mode.
Mm-hmm. All right. Aaron, what's your least favorite scene?
I think the great intelligence giving the abbot the pyramid. And this is more of an animation thing that I didn't like, and it happens in various scenes too when we see his hands. It's just it's very, the hands are badly drawn. The thumb looks like some weird squiggle, and everything. It looks very loose, and that's just like, okay. So, um,
The
yeah.
hands in general, or just Padma Sambhava's hand?
Padma Sambhava's hand, and in a couple of different scenes, but that was the scene that was the most egregious for me. It's just like, and I understand, being an artist, it's hard to draw hands and everything. I usually
Especially a hand
them.
that's over 300 years old.
Yeah, exactly. They kind of passed up the opportunity to actually put a lot of detail into that and show just how decrepit it was too. So that would have been really cool. I mean, it does look kind of,
that would have doubled the budget.
yeah, it looks kind of clawed and gnarled as it is. Hey, I've used like Flash. I've used Flash animation. What you do is you draw everything in Photoshop or some other drawing app, and then you import your artwork into Flash. Nobody draws in Flash. At least we never.
Right.
At least back in my day in 2003 with Flash MX, we never drew in Flash. Because it leaves, what it does is it leaves fragments of the drawing. If you go to try to delete it, it'll leave like shadow fragments that will create bugs in the animation that will make it just randomly stop and stuff like that. So
Damn it, I was looking up when did they get rid of Adobe Flash, so I googled when did Flash die, and they gave me the issue of Crisis on Infinite Earths in which Barry Allen died. This is why you don't trust AI.
Oh yeah, DuckDuckGo. I've been on DuckDuckGo because Google just kind of stopped working with Opera for me. So I've been using DuckDuckGo, and they're doing a beta for their own AI stuff. So I was just like, oh, okay, everyone's getting in on this.
Of course, yeah.
I'm not super anti-AI. I think it's just kind of a flood that's going to be hard to push back. And as
unmoderated AI for information purposes is just awful for so many reasons.
Yeah.
Like when it does things like take Reddit shitposts that tell you to put glue on pizza, and it gives it to you as an actual recipe.
God. Yeah, it does there needs to be some control of it over it. You can't just do whatever.
Oh, this is the last thing I'm going to say on this because it's causing a tangent. But
yeah,
I shared this with my lab group chat. There was a I guess like for some technical problem or whatever, I guess actual tech professionals were getting tired of so many people asking it and were replying on like Reddit and like forums with rickrolls about how to solve the problem. So some tech support company had an AI doing their tech support. So when their clients called in asking for help, the AI was like, oh, this link is commonly suggested as a solution to that problem, and was rickrolling the customers. So yeah, this is, you know, the concept of AI has value, but the implementation of AI for informational purposes is awful.
Yeah.
So what we were okay, so we talked about hands.
What were we talking about?
I think we're on to me now.
Yeah.
So I think there's a few different things that I mentioned. Well, there's 3 candidates in my mind, and we mentioned them all. I guess I'll say the most egregious, and that is just spending half an episode playing hide and seek with a ball. They clearly were like, we only have 5.5 episodes worth of material. We need to stretch something out longer. It was unnecessary. Like, they're like, let's all, like, 5 people surround the guard and slowly ask him about this other guy. And then we can slowly, it was about Travers, I think. And it's like, y'all, you could just, okay, the ball's not there, and now it's in the Yeti, and that's all you needed, but we needed filler. So that's my least favorite scene. My other would be, like I said, the fact that Victoria needed to, like, escape from what's his name again? Tomney twice.
Yeah.
Like, this is why Classic Who gets a reputation for being captured, rinse and repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts about the episode, Alex.
I didn't really know what to think going in. Ultimately, I think this is good. Not necessarily great. It does kind of drag a little. I mean, I'm not really one to talk for as far as denigrating a story for being constantly capture get free because I love the war games, and that is basically that for 9 episodes. So maybe it's just a matter of, like, that one, it works in the war games because they're at least in different settings involving different characters when that keeps happening. The jumping between all these time zones and shit, so there's a bit more flavor to it as opposed to just one location where it's happening the whole time. But yeah, like, again, it's nice to see this in animation where all the characters that aren't supposed to be white but are played by mostly white actors actually look like relatively close to the correct ethnicity. It's also interesting that going into this, realizing that Professor Travers is played by Deborah Watling's father, but they don't really have all that many scenes together.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, I feel like they maybe have a few more together in Web of Fear, but even then, not that much. So that's kind of interesting. The Yeti in both are like, I can see why they only really showed up twice, and then even when New Who brought the Great Intelligence back, they did not bring the Yeti back. Although I feel like they could have updated the design.
No, they went super literal and brought back actual snowmen.
Right. Which, like, I probably would have just preferred an updated version of the Yeti.
Yeah.
Or just other kind of robots or something, but oh well. But I can definitely see why the Great Intelligence came back, because it is a very interesting villain. Although I feel like I prefer the Web of Fear to this. And that might also just be a bit biased because in that we get the introduction of the Brigadier. So not as like the rank that he gets, but I think he's only like lieutenant or a lieutenant in that. I forget. But either way, it's like I would still say this is worth a look. Even if only for completionist sake, but given that it's a 6-parter and those can tend to go very long, maybe split it up into either an episode a day over 6 days, or like break it into chunks of 2, or watch half and then the other the next day or something like that. But yeah,
movie cut. We need a movie cut. All right, Aaron, final thoughts.
I went into this knowing that it was kind of a classic. It was one of the great like lost episodes. So my opinion of it was kind of already kind of tainted. It was already kind of up there a little bit. Um, so yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was atmospheric. I like how Victoria's characters expanded upon. I like the interactions between the Doctor and Jamie as always, but it's really shines here. Another funny scene that I enjoyed was the Doctor getting his hand trapped in the sphere. Just something about the animation made it like super funny for me, even though I know that he's in pain and stuff. But it seemed kind of, maybe it's the way the Doctor's hand was drawn. It just seemed kind of a little silly, but like I don't know. There was a lot of stuff, and I feel like the animation really brought like more to everything. But I like this style of animation. I like Archer and a lot of the Flash animation. Metalocalypse kind of uses a similar Flash or Flash-like animation. So, yeah, I do recommend looking at it, and I would actually recommend finding the animated versions, which I think they're really the only thing you can find other than the telesnaps. So,
By the way, at the moment, it's on YouTube. I don't know how long that's going to be true, but
oh, okay. Yeah, what else? Yeah, like, and also I think I remarked that it also felt more atmospheric. I know I did earlier in the podcast, but I'll just reiterate, it does feel a lot more atmospheric. And it could use better audio mixing though, because there were some sequences that were super quiet. So, I agree with that. As to it being too long, it didn't feel super long to me, but I was having to pause it and take care of stuff too, so I didn't get a real sense of it dragging from there. But that's just me. So, yeah, I would recommend watching it.
right. So this was an interesting experience because I knew I had already rated this a 4.0 in the past. And then I watched this and kind of, I guess, what's considered the modern style of watching things, which has always been the way my ADHD brain works, which is putting it on a second screen while I was doing other stuff on my main screen. And I kind of like came away from that viewing like this is kind of like an average episode, but not as good as I remembered. And then today I rewatched it, and all at once. This time, switch using the black and white version instead of the colored, which I do think the black and white was a little more atmospheric. There's a little bit more contrast, and it lends to the horror elements, but I don't think it changes super much. But I liked it a lot more paying closer attention, and that's why I think that is good evidence that this is the visuals are important. For example, there's a big enough cast that you need to pay attention to tell them all apart. Otherwise, it just feels like there's a shit ton of monks. There's like all the stuff with like the balls that are making no noise, and you just kind of need to watch what's happening. So this is an episode I would say to give pretty close to full attention. I'm not sure how much watching one episode a day over 6 days versus watching 6 episodes all at once affected my judgment. Because I think it was mainly how much attention I was paying to it. But yeah, in the watching it all at once, paying closer attention, I definitely enjoyed it. I definitely feel closer to my original rating than I did after not paying as much attention. I do want to shout out to Jamie in the beginning being super cocky and being like, "Oh yeah, Highlanders aren't affected by the cold." To being like, "Oh God, my knees are blue. We need to go somewhere warmer."
Yeah. And then the next story is the Ice Warriors, so tough luck.
All right, on to ratings. Alex.
This is a funny one because I went back and checked what my rating for the Web of Fear was, and that was a 4. And I'm like, I said I remember liking the Web of Fear more than I like this, but is it that enough to drop this down slightly, or just have them be on par for different reasons, score-wise? You know what? Yeah, I feel like I ultimately have so few complaints that even though it does drag a bit, that can at least justify it being a 4.
4.0. Aaron.
I'm going to try to meter my excitement. I was originally going to give this a 5.0. I'm going to lower that down to a 4.5.
4.5. Okay. What do I feel about this episode? I want to give it like a 4.25, but that's not an option. I think, just judging by the fact that I tend to use stricter criteria for 4.5 and 5 than I do for moving up the other levels, keeping it at a 4.0 just like I originally had it makes the most sense. So in the original ratings, Rand gave it a 2.5, Matt gave it a 3.5, Tim gave it a 3.5, and I was the high roll with a 4.0. I've noticed that often is the case with telesnaps because I often deduct less for telesnaps than others do. So the average for telesnaps was 3.38. So the average from the 3 ratings that we just said for today only is 4.17, using only the animated version and no telesnaps. And then the average across all 6 panelists is 3.67 for mixed versions of the episode. Let's see where that places us. Come on. Here we go. So 3.67 places this in the realm of 299 to 308 out of 483 things reviewed. At least I think Joy to the Earth is in there. I should check. It is on par with Smile, The Claws of Axos, Dragonfire, and that's it of the main show. It is not as good as The Idiot's Lantern, Flatline, The Daleks, or The Moonbase. And it is better than The Star Beast, Night Terrors, Resurrection of the Daleks, and Full Circle. So that is all we have to say about the Abominable Snowmen. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this week's story. Like I said, if you're watching this as we release on YouTube, this episode is, unless it's already been taken down by BBC, I don't know. But as we're streaming this, it's currently available on YouTube, so you can watch it and let us know what you think. Don't forget to like this video if you've listened this far, and subscribe on YouTube to get our exports, or follow us on Twitch to get notified when we stream. Next time, we take a look at a story we've already seen animated, but this time with the proper doctor. We review Shada, written by Douglas Adams, starring Tom Baker as the Doctor and Lala Ward as Romanad Virat-Rolundar, animated by BBC Studios. We'll see you then.